Hello and welcome to Neuroshambles, the podcast that aims to shine a light into some of the murkier corners of what it's like to parent neurodivergent kids. I'm Mark Allen, and every episode I'm going to be swapping stories with my guests about some of the frankly ludicrous nonsense we have to deal with on a daily basis. So, if you're anything like me and you're feeling frazzled, overwhelmed and pretty much an outcast from polite society, join me. Hello and welcome to episode 61 of Neuroshambles. Thank you so much for joining me yet again, Neuroshamblers, as we take a deep dive into another knotty facet of raising neurodivergent kids. Weirdly, it seems like I've saved up a load of these big topics for the end of the season, doesn't it? But it's not by design, I promise. That's just the way that it happens to have panned out. Anyway, as well as that, I'm also going to be looking at some Neurodiversity Champions, some tiny epic wins, and yet more what the flip moments. So, in the immortal words of Marvin Gaye, let's get it on.
Meet the guest.
So this week's guest is a Neuroshambles favourite who I've been really keen to get back on because she has trodden the rocky road of raising multiple neurodivergent kids and has emerged the other side as a beacon of positivity and support to other parents. Not only is she a former speech and language therapist, she's also an autism family consultant and an author with a new book coming out very soon. Very exciting. So I am delighted to be able to welcome back. It's Lisa Galley. How you doing, Lisa?
Yay, thank you. I'm good, thank you. It's amazing to be back for a third time.
Third time, yeah. One per season. We ration you two, apparently. Not by design. But yeah, that's just how it's worked out. You've been very busy working on your book, so...
I have, yeah. So thank you for having me. It's really delightful to be here. It's always a treat to chat to you and have a bit of a giggle along the way.
Lovely to hear. For any Neuroshambles listeners who don't know about you and your setup, can you just give us a quick recap of the neurodivergencies at play in your household, please?
Yeah, so we're all neurospicy in our own way. So I have 3 grown-up autistic children. Mm-hmm. 2 of them live independently and 1 lives at home. My husband is ADHD. And I have something called dyscalculia, mm-hmm. Which is basically, it's to do with number blindness and lots of other things. But yeah, so that's our very neurospicy household.
So you speak from lived experience, which is a very valuable insight to have, especially as yours have all grown up now.
Yeah, I'm on a new path now, parenting adults, which is it's different challenges.
Yeah, it's a whole separate episode.
Yeah, that's another
season
book,
4. We'll get you back with season 4 for that. Okay, thank you for introducing us to your setup. Let's crack on with this topic of the week because I think it's one that a lot of people are going to find very interesting.
What's the topic of the week?
So this week's topic of the week is one of those rare ones that I think are going to be relevant to every single neuroshambler out there without exception. Because although neurodiversity can present in many different forms, one of the few experiences that all of our kids share to a greater or lesser degree are meltdowns. So when we say the word meltdown, I think a lot of people think of the classic presentation of that, which is a child who is so overwhelmed that they have an explosive reaction. So it's anger and shouting, throwing things, sometimes verbal and physical aggression, largely the kind of behaviour that causes strangers to nudge each other and roll their eyes in your local Aldi, that kind of thing. But I think the definition of a meltdown is broader than that because it depends how your child reacts when they're no longer able to regulate their nervous system. So that can also include tears, running out of the room, hiding under the table, shutdowns. So there's lots of other different presentations that I think is worth shining a light on. So in this episode, I wanted to unpick the different presentations of meltdowns, as well as looking at some of the things that can trigger them, what we can do to help our kids when they're in meltdown, and some of the ways we can potentially reduce them before they happen, hopefully. So we got a lot on our plate for this episode, Lisa. No pressure.
Yep, we have. No pressure.
So I think it's worth looking at what a meltdown is, firstly. Yeah. What happens in our kids' brains and bodies when they experience it?
Yeah, I mean, you've described meltdown really well, but it is literally our kids' nervous system it's just been pushed beyond its limit, so it's in survival mode. And so if we think about the nervous system having kind of different states that we all go through throughout the day, and kind of the window of tolerance is that state where we're regulated. It means we can cope with challenges as well. It doesn't just mean we're calm. It means we can cope with life. And when our kids kind of fall out of that window of tolerance, whether it's, as you described, into shutdown or whether it's into, overload meltdown, that's when they're in that dysregulated state. And that's when they're not using that thinking part of their brain, that reasoning part of their brain. They are literally in survival mode. The nervous system is doing exactly what it was designed to do, which is to keep our kids safe, to protect them from threats. And that's when they're in a meltdown. That threat can be lots of different things around them. It can even be you. Often it is you. You are the threat that they want to get away from.
Yeah. It's interesting to talk about that window of tolerance, because I think, everyone has a window of tolerance. And that is dependent on lots of different things. Typically for me, the amount of sleep I get that I'm allowed, I'm afforded by my kids. So everyone has a window of tolerance. I think it's fair to say that with neurodivergent brains, that window of tolerance can be reduced by a number of things that we're probably not aware of very often.
Our kids have a very narrow window of tolerance, and they're often living right on the edge of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like most of their time is spent very close to the edge of that window of tolerance. So it's so easy for them to tip out of it. And that a lot of that is to do with capacity, which and we'll talk about probably a little bit later on when we're thinking about preventing meltdowns. Yeah.
And I think the window of tolerance, it's maybe helpful to think of it as it's just that they are subject to so many different variables that cause dysregulation, that even things that we wouldn't necessarily see as an issue as neurotypicals or adults as well, because I think you learn tolerance a little bit more as you get older, but they're subject to variables like lighting changes or just background noise. Maybe the neighbor's got the strimmer on, something like that reduces that window of tolerance.
I explain to parents it's a bit like an oversensitive fire alarm, smoke alarm.
Okay,
it's going off all the time, but it doesn't know whether it's a house fire or whether you've burnt some toast.
Yes.
So it's so sensitive. It's a nice way to kind of think about like the window of tolerance and why we kind of see it as so kind of on the edge.
There was an analogy that I used in a previous episode that I think is worth bringing back into this conversation, because I quite like it as a way of explaining what's going on with our kids. And I know, you are a self-avowed technophobe, so I won't get
I am indeed.
I won't get too into this, but if you use a computer, it has RAM, right? Random access memory, which is basically the thing that allows your computer to use multiple different processes at once. So some computers have an enormous amount of RAM. So whatever you throw at it, if it's got lots of RAM, it can deal with it. So it can do Photoshop and a podcast export and a YouTube upload and a game of Minecraft all running simultaneously without any noticeable impact on the computer. Now, some computers don't have as much RAM. So when you ask it to do lots of different things at once, it starts having an impact. So it starts slowing down and it starts overheating, and eventually it will crash. And I feel like that's what it's like for the neurodivergent brain.
That's a great analogy. Can I steal that?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's brilliant. Yeah.
Because the thing is, there are lots of different processes running in our kids' brain, as we said before, that we might not even recognize. It's the handling group conversations, or filtering out background noise, or managing the sensation of feeling too cold, or being away from your safe space, or being unsure about what's happening next. All of these different things use up the processing power in their brains until the point that they get to that crash. So when they're at that full capacity, if one other thing gets added, could be anything, being denied something they were looking forward to, or a sensory trigger, or a demand at the wrong moment, then it triggers that meltdown. And sometimes you don't see it coming. It's like, I don't know what led to that. It's because you don't see all the other things that they've got processing.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah. And in my book, I talk about demands and capacity model, which I've used kind of throughout my career with kids. And it's like very much like your analogy, but it's like balancing scales, like the old fashioned way in scales.
Yes.
And on one side, you've got all the demands they're dealing with. And on the other side, you've got their capacity to actually balance those demands. And like certain times of year, particularly at the moment, that side is going to be really stacked, that demand side.
At
because,
the moment, yeah, you're right.
they're not out of class for things, and timetables gone, and everything's changed, and they might have non-school uniform days, and all of that is adding to that side, and we don't see it.
Yeah.
And their capacity, and then at some point, like you said, one more thing is added and it tips. The scales tip, and then they're like, oh well, where did that come from? We only asked them to come and come in from outside, or we only asked him to sit at the table,
and it might be something they're totally fine with normally, because they have that capacity. But then this is just that thing too much. You're so right to point out this time of year as well, because it's an absolute shit show at my end.
It is a shit show. I just can't get my head around that schools cannot see that for our kids, that those off timetable things, those school trips, all of that are not necessarily positive things for them. That actually we feel like our kids have to join in, they have to do it because it's a nice thing to do, but actually taking away one of those demands, them not going on the school trip or them not going into school on sports day, could be the thing that actually saves that family from an evening of absolute hell and explosion. And I think as a society we can't get our head around that actually it's like the same at Christmas. Well, they should join in. It's a happy thing. They should be able to do that. Well, no, not necessarily.
And as you're saying, the only way that we can hopefully push back that meltdown or defer that meltdown is to reduce the number of things that are putting pressure on that processing power.
Absolutely.
So at the moment, the heat is causing a big issue for my kids because they absolutely hate it when it's hot and they can't handle that. There's all of this, end of term nonsense that is going on with enrichment days and leavers assemblies and sports days and all of this, and Otto is all over the place. And this morning it was just too much for him. Well, last night it was too much for him, and the trigger was me telling him that I'd got a present for his teachers, right? Because his teachers have been amazing. Obviously, I want to get them a present and a card to say thank you so much for helping him through this year, because it's been tricky for all of us. And it wasn't the fact that I was giving it them, it was the fact that they might mention it to him.
Right,
and he just couldn't sleep last night. And this morning he was in tears. And I was like, look, I will promise I will give it to them with a note saying, do not ever mention this to Otto. Please destroy this note and enjoy your present.
Burn this note after reading.
Because Otto is, for whatever reason, doesn't like that attention. But it isn't just that thing. It's everything that's leading up to that.
And that makes sense in a way, doesn't it? Because there are expectations with giving a present. We expect a response. There's a correct response. And that's a lot of pressure. So you can understand at this time of year with everything else, I can see why for him that would feel huge. But other parents wouldn't get that, would they?
No, of course not.
The teachers themselves might not even understand why something like that would be so much pressure for a child.
So I have to deliver them with very strict instructions. Please do not be thankful. Just take it, enjoy it. One of the things in your new book, which I loved, by the way, it was fantastic. And because I managed to get a cheeky preview. It's not out yet, guys. I managed to get a sneak preview, and it's an absolute treat. And I'll be giving details of that later on. But in the book, you talk about 3 main causes of meltdown, which I'd not thought about in that way. And I think it's really helpful. So you break it down into sensory overload, communication breakdown, and unpredictability, which I think all meltdowns can, it might be a combination of those.
Yeah, could be all of them.
But it does explain a little bit about what might be going on for them.
Yeah, I mean, over the years, I've seen, God, I can't tell you how many meltdowns, and I've kind of started to categorize them and realize actually they do fall into one or more of these 3 categories. And so sensory, you think about sensory overwhelm, like we were talking again about our children having all that information to process, but if you think about a cup, a lot of OTs will talk about like a sensory cup, and our kids start their day with their sensory cup often already half full, on a normal day.
Even just waking up.
Exactly. And then when you're adding in all that extra sensory information that they're having to put up with and having to deal with, it can tip over and their cup can just overflow. And we have those senses as well as like the normal senses that we think of. We've also got things like, vestibular, which is balance and movement, and proprioception, which is actually knowing where our bodies feel in space. And something I noticed with my children, particularly Barney, was that he would often lie on the floor when he was having a meltdown. And when I realised it wasn't about him being bloody minded and I'm not going to walk anymore, it was, I need to ground. I literally need to ground myself. I need to feel my body on the floor.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, that just was a massive thing for me.
Yeah, because very often when you think about a meltdown, it is kids on the floor.
Yeah,
and it's not just like, I'm not defiance. It's feeling grounded. That makes so much sense. I'd not thought about it that way.
Yeah, so that's a huge one. And then interoception, which is those internal sensations like, feeling hungry or needing to go to the toilet. And our kids don't always necessarily feel those sensations, or they might be like my eldest son, who's PDA, he would feel them, but that would be pressure for him.
Because
that's a demand. Yeah. So we can think about kind of sensory overwhelm as being like one of the reasons. And then communication breakdown. And that falls into two areas really, because we've got, before a meltdown, you might find that actually your child has difficulty communicating their needs. Lots of our kids have communication differences.
Yeah.
So you've already got that frustration building and not being able to communicate what I need. I can't tell you that I'm getting too hot, or I can't tell you.
Or they might not even be aware of it. So that's back
they
to
might
that
not be aware of it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then once they're in a meltdown, what we find is that the speech and language processing part of the brain starts to shut down, and they don't have access to that language processing. So then on top of that frustration, their communication really reduces.
Yes.
And that's even for children who typically are conversational and can have a conversation with you, but in a meltdown, the access to that language is limited and their understanding of your language is really reduced.
Yes.
And so we put a lot of pressure on our kids in the meltdown to talk and to reason.
Or
why are you
questions.
doing this?
What's wrong?
Asking questions, exactly. What's
wrong? Literally the worst thing you can ask at that point.
Exactly,
because as you say, their brain is not able to deal with this.
They're not able to. And you're just adding another level of processing that they've got to then try and process.
And that is really frustrating as a parent. I think it's worth kind of shining a light on that as well. It's like, we will do whatever we can to help them through this. It's really hard seeing your child having a meltdown, and you really want to do everything you can, because we're so used to advocating for their needs and for trying to help them navigate this. And I do it myself, and I catch myself doing it all the time, particularly with India, because she shuts down, which we'll get onto later.
Yeah.
But I want to know the answers, right? What can I do? So I will ask them, which is ridiculous, because it's expecting so much of her to understand what's going on, understand what it is that she needs, and then communicate that to me, is really putting a lot of extra pressure on India. But it's frustrating for me, because I'll do anything. Like, literally, if you'd say, go and do the Macarena and I'll be fine, I'll be doing it in Asda. I don't care. But at that time, I don't have any of those clues, and it's really hard.
Yeah,
but it's even harder on them. So you have to find a different way of navigating it.
I think it's one of the hardest things as a parent to, exactly like you said, to be there when they're having a meltdown and feel so helpless that you don't know what to do. And obviously we'll talk about what we can do in a while. But as parents, it's really tough on us. And sometimes, like you said, we talk about our kids a lot and the struggles they're having. But as parents, we need that validation that this is bloody hard. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to make this better. And sometimes not doing anything is the right thing to do. And that can be, a mind fuck, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It feels like you're being negligent.
Yeah, exactly. And people are viewing us. And
that's it. Other people look at that and go, well, they're not doing anything.
Doing something. You
don't want to see me try. Because it makes it a lot worse.
Yeah, you want to see me pour some petrol on this bonfire and go for it. Yeah. So communication, that's the second thing. And then unpredictability. So we know that our kids, many of our kids rely on routine to feel safe. They need that predictability to keep their nervous system regulated. And so when things change, unexpectedly, like this time of year, their nervous system kind of goes into shock, and as I said before, it doesn't sort of pause to say, well, is this a big problem or a small problem? It just goes change, reaction.
Yeah, it's another thing I have to process.
This is danger, so I'm gonna react to that. And so it flips into survival mode. And often I think a meltdown can go into all three of those areas.
Yes.
If a child is frustrated, like I said, they can't tell you that they're feeling hot, then you've got that sensory overwhelm as well as that kind of lack of communication skills. And then you might have unpredictability because it's a non-school uniform day. They weren't expecting that. So, it sometimes it's helpful later on, after a meltdown's gone, even a few days later, to just think, well, actually, where would I put that when I think about those 3 areas? And I think we do that with like no judgment. It's just curiosity. No
Yes.
one's to blame. It's just, can I think about what was at play?
And it's
when
all
that
about
meltdown.
evidence gathering, isn't it? And going, well, let's see,
absolutely.
because our role is to try wherever possible to remove some of these bumps in the road for them ahead of time. So if sports day's coming up, right, then you scaffold that very early on. Like with Otto, it's like sports day's coming up, everyone's going to be talking about it. You are not expected to go to sports day. You are going to actually hang out at home. So it's making sure that change in routine is signposted as early on as possible, and then say, but it's okay, here are the plans in place. And a lot of that happens in hindsight, though. Sometimes because there are things we can do to reduce it, but sometimes it only becomes clear what we could have done once it happened, which is, again, as a parent, feels horrible. It's like, I should have seen this coming.
And I think we have to be kind to ourselves, because otherwise you're constantly firefighting, you're constantly risk assessing, and sometimes we miss things, but also sometimes you do all the right things, and then there's still a meltdown, and we can't work out why it happened, and that's okay as well. Sometimes we can put everything in place and then it still happens. So I think as parents, we need to be kind to ourselves and not beat ourselves up too much about what we could have done, which is easier said than done, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
That's part of being a parent, is we feel guilty. It just comes with the territory.
What we did quite early on with Jay in particular is we logged a lot of his meltdowns, because again, it's really useful for kind of EHCPs and getting a diagnosis and that side of things. So we logged a lot of that, and sometimes when you do that, you spot a pattern. Every Tuesday he has a meltdown going in, and what is it about that? And maybe there's a substitute teacher in that week, or whatever it is, but you can start to sort of identify things just from writing them down, which I find useful.
I think that's really useful, and something I definitely recommend to parents is to keep a log, because like you said, you start to see those patterns building, and you've got, it's data, isn't it? You take the emotion out of it, and you are actually, let's have a look at what we've got.
Worth just identifying that's not an easy thing to do either, because it feels like you're chronicling your child in their worst moments and their most difficult moments. But it is important information, I think. If you're trying to work out what potential triggers for meltdown are, then that could be quite useful. So I wanted to look into the different types of meltdown response, because we touched on it a little bit in the introduction, but I wanted to explore it a bit further, because not all meltdowns are explosive. They're the most obvious ones. They're the ones that people will most often associate with meltdowns. But I think that the way that our kids react depends on their response when their survival instinct kicks in. And there are generally 4 responses that people talk about, which is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. There's another one, which is flop, which we've talked about. But again, that's more, a much more cumulative build-up of all of these things that leads to people not being able to get out of bed.
Burnout.
But let's just kind of go with the first 4 at the moment. As I've said many times on Neuroshambles, my kids each respond to meltdowns in a different way, which, same diagnosis, completely different response to meltdowns. I mean, with your lot, do they experience meltdowns differently?
All 3 of them respond very differently, and obviously as adults now we see it less, but my daughter particularly, she wasn't diagnosed till she was in her 20s. So although we had our suspicions in her teenage years, so she is a classic example of fawning. So she that almost like that good girl response, that she just wants to please everybody. And as an adult, she's now described that in a bit more detail to me, that when she kind of does go into freeze, and we often think of freeze as it's shut down, but actually she describes her freeze is internally she is screaming, like internally she's really having that meltdown. It is heartbreaking. But it's important, I think, to know that, because we think of regulation as being quiet, and that's not always the case. A quiet child doesn't necessarily mean that they're a regulated child. And and that worries me in classes at school as well, when some children are, they are fawning, they are people pleasing, but internally they're not regulated.
Yeah.
And that accumulative effect, like you said, it can lead to kind of burnout, which it did for her. But it's so useful as adults for them to describe that to me now, for her to say, actually, internally, I'm having the same type of meltdown as the boys. I am screaming. I am just like, I need to do something. So yeah, very different.
So fawning is essentially masking, right? Which is
it's people pleasing. It's I'm going to do what people want me to do to stay safe. So if all our responses to meltdowns are about safety, so how am I going to be safe? So like the obvious, fight the tiger, run away from the tiger, freeze so the tiger can't see me. But then with fawning, it's
pretend to be a tiger.
Pretend to be, I'm gonna be part of.
I'll blend in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But then that is accompanied by freeze very often.
Yeah.
But when she got home, because that's in public, right?
Yeah.
How would that meltdown manifest itself then? Did it sort of manifest itself into fight or flight, or was it something different?
Actually, it didn't for her.
Okay.
For the boys, often they would have meltdowns that were like very external at school, but sometimes they wouldn't. Sometimes they would mask all day,
right?
And then they would come home, and we would see that 3:30, the 3:30 hell of it all coming out. Actually, for Jess, she was a lot more complicated. That she almost masked at home as well. And she says now that she's had to teach herself not to mask, because she even does it when she's on her own in her own flat. It's become so ingrained that I stay safe by behaving like this, by not being neurodivergent at all, that it's taken her a long time to unmask. So actually at home we didn't see those external meltdowns with her. Yeah.
But then you're saying that led to burnout eventually.
That led to burnout, yeah.
And it's useful to point out that that's not a conscious decision.
No.
The fawn response is not I'm going to just do what they say. It's just
it's the nervous system doing what it needs to do. And I think with our girls, we do see a lot more fawning in girls than boys. Yeah. Not to say that boys don't fawn. And I think it's part of the issue why they are a lot later getting their diagnosis, because it's harder to spot, right? If a child is smiling and happy and calm and quiet, then we're not going to necessarily assume that there's an issue, that there's something going on.
And when you do it for long enough, that becomes the norm, right?
Yeah.
That becomes what happens, and it takes so much time to unpick all of that, as I'm sure many late diagnosed neurodivergents will recognize. I know that Tam is late diagnosed and he's still trying to put together who they are.
Yeah.
What do I like? Yeah. What do I like? Not, what do I...
It's so ingrained, isn't it? That it's so ingrained that they've done this for so long to feel safe, that actually unmasking can feel very unsafe. It's like, actually, is this okay for me to do this? Who am I?
Yeah.
It's like an onion, like you're peeling away the layers to get to who we are.
Tam sees it in quite a liberating way now, I think, a few years in, that they now just reflect on pretty much everything that happens and go, do I actually want to do this? So there's a party that sounds like it might be fun, and there are people there that I know would be quite fun, but actually going, is that a thing I would enjoy? No, so I'm not going to go to the party. But it takes that reflection and that understanding of your own neurotype and how you respond in those situations to do that. And obviously our kids don't have that yet, that awareness yet, because...
No, not yet. But I think by supporting them through meltdowns, that's another thing, actually, when we sit with them through the meltdowns and we help them to process the meltdowns and what that feels like, my kids kind of now have got to the point where, exactly as you said, that they know what their limit is, so they know what their capacity is. And one of my kids loves to go to parties and clubs and busy towns. They absolutely adore it, but they know the payoff for that is that they are going to reach their capacity and they're going to absolutely crash. Whereas my other kids will not touch a party or a nightclub at all. They're just like, no, I'm not doing that, because they've learned actually that doesn't work for them. So as parents, we can support our kids. Every meltdown they have, although it's so stressful and traumatic for us, if we think about actually when we sit with them through those feelings, when we help them respond to what their body feels like, each time they're starting to learn a little bit more about themselves, so that they can advocate for themselves as they get a little bit older. Yeah,
and have that awareness of what it is that triggers those meltdowns, those cumulative effects.
Yeah.
So that's the sort of fawn side of things, and we touched on the freeze, but I think it's worth kind of going into a little bit deeper, because this is India's presentation of overwhelm, is that shutdown, not being able to communicate at all, will just go completely situationally mute, as I've discussed multiple times on this podcast. But she only really is able to make, it's quite difficult to listen to, but quite like grunting noises, almost like an animal, and when she's trying to communicate but she can't. And the thing about the fawn and the freeze types of meltdown is that they don't draw much attention compared to the other two. So I will only notice it a while, like quite a bit after she's started having it, because my house is chaos and there's lots going on and I won't know. And then I'll sort of turn to India and maybe ask her a question, and I'll notice she's in meltdown. And then I'm trying to piece together what it is that causes the meltdown. And then, as we talked about earlier, asking that questions as to what caused it, what can I do, is the worst thing I can do in that situation. So it's really hard. I have to sort of find the clues. So it may have been like she's broken her fidget toy. That was one recently. She had a fidget toy. She really liked it. She gets through these squishy fidget toys. Like, she's got the grip of an arm wrestler. Seriously, she's
cracking walnuts in her.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy. It's like Popeye with the spinach.
Wow, that's a skill. You need to harness that.
I'll do that. But when she does it, because it's a stress reliever, right? It helps her stay regulated. So when she breaks it, she's not only attached to this thing that gives her comfort, she's now broken it. So that was a recent thing, and I had to follow the trail of goo, the goo that's inside those fidgets, and go, I know what's happened here, and then have to kind of work through that. Another one was that she was doing a card for someone and had just made a mistake. And that's a big thing for her. So she went completely nonverbal. And again, I had to look for the clues, and I saw the card on the table that had been scribbled out and ripped up. It's like, okay, so that's what it was. It's really hard to parent that one.
It is, yeah.
But again, it's just looking for the clues and trying to help deal with that. The other... And we're going in reverse order from the ones I mentioned. So I quite like this, though. It's good. Keep you on your toes, Neuroshamblers. The other one is the flight response. Have you got any flight responders?
Oh, my goodness. My eldest son is a flight responder.
Oh, right. Okay.
Constantly. Even now as an adult, it's interesting that one of his go-to things is just to leave something, or like get away as quick as possible. He will just go. And as a child, he would get out eloped from school all the time.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Luckily,
which is worrying, obviously.
Very worrying. It was, we're talking, he's 30 now, so we're talking a long time ago. But it was a small village school. And often he would get out and be running up the village, and they were trying to get him back. He would come home from school holding it all in. And as soon as he got out the car, he would run off.
Just into the hills?
Yeah, just off. Yeah, I'm going.
Trail of
death. So it'd be like driving around trying to find him. So I think that's a really hard one because of safety. One of the worst meltdowns he ever had. In fact, I mentioned this on social media a couple of weeks ago, and it got a lot of response. Was he jumped out of his bedroom window, and it was horrendous. He landed on the conservatory roof and rolled. Somehow he just rolled, and he was not injured. I don't know how he wasn't injured. And I think for me that was a real turning point, because I was aware that the way I was parenting at that point was not helping. I was still trying to parent in that very neurotypical way of, this is not okay behaviour, talking. I'd followed him to his bedroom. He'd thrown a guitar at me. I still didn't take that as a hint to leave. He told me to leave. I didn't leave. So he left. He jumped out the window. And
that's his survival instinct, right?
That's his survival
instinct. You are the bear.
Yeah. You are the threat. Yeah. You are the threat. I'm getting... And obviously his sense of safety had gone at that point. There was, and he was...
You were a bigger threat than a drop from a height, which is...
Yeah, which is really worrying. And that's when I looked at changing how I responded to meltdowns. And so it became a little bit safer after that.
Yeah, that's
an extreme.
That really is an extreme one, but
we do have a flight one.
See, Otto responds with flight, but in a slightly different way. Because it's crying and panicking and running out of the room.
Yeah.
Not to the degree that he'd jump out of a window or abscond, because he's also very anxious. So he wouldn't. He still needs to be near, like he needs to be safe. But it is very much like, there's the thing, and I need to get away from the thing.
Yeah.
And again, you know, that presents in lots of different ways, but just remove myself from that situation. And it would take him a long time to calm down. And very often I think that's just time on their own, right? Which again, we'll get into sort of different strategies for different responses. But yeah, flight is not always as extreme as jumping out of a window.
No,
it could be like,
I must add that it's not always
under the
that
table or getting in a cupboard, or that kind of thing.
Yeah, it amazes me sometimes what our kids are able to do. Like, it's intuitive, isn't it, that actually I'm going to leave this environment because this environment is causing me to feel stressed.
Yeah.
And when you actually pick it apart, it's quite amazing that they've got that intuition to do that. It's just obviously sometimes it's not the safest thing.
It takes us time to catch up. There's the thing. They're showing us, they're showing us what they need by actually doing it, and we're there going, "What's wrong?" Like chasing after them.
Yeah.
So we just need to be led by our kids sometimes. They're giving us all the clues. It's just working out how to interpret them, I guess.
Yeah.
The final response was one that is probably more familiar to most parents of neurodivergent kids, I think, is because it's the most visible. Yeah. And it's also probably the most difficult to deal with, I think, for the parent rather than for the child, is the fight response.
Yeah.
This is Jay's presentation when he's overwhelmed.
Okay.
Do you have any fighty responders?
Not so much. So my eldest was a fighter and a flighter, so you'd have a bit of fight first, then a flight,
and then run away.
But in our household, we don't have so much kind of the fight. Barney, when he was younger, would kind of, I suppose he was more fight, but not towards a person. It would be kind of destruction around him.
Yeah, which is that more explosive presentation.
Yeah.
And it's not always physical fighting, as you say. It's sometimes, with Jay, it's more often verbal aggression, or just the hard no to what you're asking them to do. They're fighting your demands and, sometimes their own demands.
It's viewed, isn't it, as very defiant as well, I think, from the public and society. We see that it's like more classic tantrum type behaviour that people think, oh, that's naughty.
That was the one that I misread earlier on in our journey with Jay, because I would be offended that he would speak to me like that. Yeah. Because again, sometimes what they say is really awful and really hurtful. And very often the reason for that is like, I need you to get away from me. And if I say an awful thing, you're going to want to get away from me. It's not necessarily to hurt. It's just to go, dude, I'm not a person you want to be around at the moment.
It's like pressing, I say something, it's like pressing like the panic button. I'm going to say this, the worst thing I can think of. I'm going to go nuclear. But actually, I'm communicating to you that this is really bad. I'm not feeling okay. I need you.
Yes.
I need you to help me here, and that's how they communicate it.
Yeah, and in those days, my ego would be wounded because it's because again, I grew up with relatively traditional parenting stereotypes of I am the parent, I'm in charge. How dare you defy me? So then I would end up shouting back, which is the worst thing that you could do. As you said earlier, it's like pouring petrol onto a fire, because not only am I doubling down on the thing that is causing him to respond in that way anyway, there's also the sensory overwhelm of me shouting as well. So I'm adding more to that, and it always just got worse until we'd just be shouting at each other, which is never a good look. To be arguing with a 5-year-old, is it?
Yes, no.
So now, I mean, he still responds in this way now.
Right.
If he's overwhelmed, he'll still shout and say awful things, but I know where it's from now. Yeah. So I don't respond in the same way.
It? Yeah, I think understanding meltdowns can be such a big piece of the puzzle.
Yes.
And I think that's where things can really start to change, is when you understand why it's happening and where it's coming from.
Yeah.
That it's not always, in the moment, we can't always rationalize, but I think it takes away that kind of frustration. It's like, okay, this isn't great. I know why he's swearing at me. I'm not going to, do the usual and punish, and
Yeah.
despite the pressure from, in-laws or other people. But it gives you that confidence as a parent, I think, that what you're doing is right in the long run.
Yeah, it takes a while to get there, I
Takes a
think,
while to
because
get
it
there,
is
yeah.
like, now it's water off a duck's back to me when he says stuff, but it's taken a long time to get there and to sit and deal with that.
Yeah, you have to grow a very thick skin.
Whew, yeah, I had a recent experience at my parents' house when Jay and I were playing a board game, and he was losing. He wouldn't admit to that. He was losing. It wasn't going well for him. And then there was a slight misinterpretation of the rules, and he lost his shit at me in front of my parents, and they'd never seen that before, but he just sort of stood up and he yelled "fuck you" in my face. I have never sworn in front of my parents ever. Right.
Okay. Wow.
So that was like a really big, like really jarring for them, and obviously mortifying for me, because no one wants someone else to witness their kids speaking to them like that. So I just said, go upstairs and just kind of do some gaming or whatever it is that was going to regulate him, and he did that, and I didn't react back to Jay, and he went off to regulate, and I avoided eye contact with my parents for the rest of the day, and that was that.
But well done for not feeling that pressure to parent in a way that was expected. I think that's
true,
a big
actually.
thing for us. It's
it is.
There's a generation of people that do expect us to parent a certain way, and it can be really hard not to give into that and tell them off, because that's what
your parents would expect. That's a really interesting point. I'd not really thought of, but normally, like, older version of me would have felt pressure to show that I was in charge, because that's how my parents parented me. So we're like, look, I'm doing parenting, watch.
I'm doing the parenting, can't you see?
I thought it'd be useful to go into some of the common misconceptions about meltdown, because it's one thing that you sort of touched on earlier, and one thing that really frustrates me when people view meltdowns who don't know about neurodiversity and how it can present in different people. And the worst thing that they can say is, he's just having a tantrum. It's dismissing a meltdown as a tantrum is so uniquely frustrating to me, I think. And I think it's worth going into the differences, because tantrums do exist. That's not saying that kids don't have tantrums. Our kids can have tantrums when they're little. Not all tantrums are meltdowns, but meltdowns are not tantrums, and they're very different. This is something that I covered in one of the talks that I do. It's the How to Deal with Judgement, a Survival Guide talk.
Oh, that sounds great.
Which looks at common things that people say, and then unpicking where it comes from and what you can usefully say in response whilst keeping your cool.
Oh, brilliant.
If you want to book me for that talk, hello@neuroshambles.com. Happy to come and deliver that for you. But what I'd sort of focus on here is the differences between a tantrum. So tantrums are directed towards a specific goal, typically. So your toddler who is having a tantrum wants something, right? They want to get attention, or they want a toy, or they want a biscuit, or to avoid bedtime, or whatever it is. They're doing it because there's a thing they want that they can't get. That's not what meltdowns are.
No, and I think it can look like that though, can't it? Because our kids, when they're having a meltdown, there is a goal sometimes, and that goal is to sometimes to be away from something, or even actually needing something for regulation. So there is a goal, but it's very different. And I think people who don't understand neurodivergence would find that impossible to pick apart and see the difference of that.
It may even be that they want a thing, but that the denial of that thing is the final straw. There's been loads of other things leading up to that. So it looks like it's triggered by that, but it's not. There's so much more under the surface that's leading up to that. So it's more complex than just like, oh, I said that no to sweets, and they're now.
Or I said it's time to switch the iPad off. That's a classic one, isn't it?
Yeah. And now they're in full-blown meltdown. Another of the differences between tantrums and meltdowns is that tantrums often intensify when there's someone watching. When they know they've got an audience, those toddlers kicking off. They're they go bigger. They try and get everyone involved in it. And also the advice, if your toddler is having a tantrum, is to just ignore them or walk off so they don't have that audience. Meltdowns happen regardless of whether or not there's anyone watching.
Yeah.
If anyone is watching, typically they're oblivious to it because they're not in their rational brain.
No.
Meltdowns also can happen in private, right? The smashing of the room, and it doesn't require an audience.
No.
Another of the differences is that tantrums stop when the child gets what they want, right?
Yeah.
When they're distracted. They're like, okay, I'll buy you a Freddo.
Yeah.
And then they go, all right, fine, let's crack on then.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, for God's
Deal
sake.
done.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas meltdowns can't. Because if it's got to that point, let's use the same example. They've been triggered into meltdown by saying you can't have a Freddo because, we've got having dinner in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Once they're in that meltdown, giving them the Freddo at that point is not going to make a difference because they're already over the edge.
Too far. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So they can't just switch it off. And then the other thing to focus on really is that how much a meltdown takes out of kids. So again, as we're saying, like with the tantrum, the toddler will recover pretty quickly, right? They'll dust themselves down, get off the floor, and just skip off, right? With Freddo around their face. Whereas with meltdowns, it takes an enormous amount of energy out of our kids. So it will very often take them a lot more time to recover from that. One thing to notice is that I think tantrums do tend to disappear as kids get older. That's the thing. You don't see grown adults fling themselves on the floor because they can't get what they want. Typically, they might swear a bit or, use other measures, but it's not like that, that issue because with toddlers, their prefrontal cortex is just not yet developed enough to regulate those big emotions. And very often they don't have the language or the cognitive tools to process that. So they resort to losing their shit. Right?
As a coping tool.
Yeah, exactly. It's valid. But when their brain develops, typically they learn alternative ways to process that frustration. With meltdowns, as we said, it's not about achieving something. It's just that the nervous system has been pushed way beyond its capacity to cope. And now they're in their survival instinct. You have to let it play out.
And I think what you're saying about age, that's actually really interesting and important point, isn't it? Because as our kids get older and they're having those meltdowns, people accept it less. Like if you're in the supermarket and you've got a 5-year-old who's is having a meltdown, you might get a few looks or comments, but generally people just think, oh, it's a child having a tantrum. But when you've got a 13-year-old in the supermarket having a meltdown, then the reaction is very different. And I think that can be really hard as parents as our kids get older and older to handle that because they're bigger as well. Yeah. And it becomes more of a threat and people see it as, one of my worries was always that my kids as adults would end up having a meltdown and, people around them and police or even, just see it as something, as a real threat, because that behaviour is not acceptable in society, is it? By a 20-year-old.
And people don't know where it's coming from because it's a hidden disability. So it's not immediately obvious, which is, brings me on to one of the other misconceptions that we have where people see that behaviour and they see it as bad behaviour. Yeah. The implication here is that the child is making a choice to react in this way. They've weighed up the options. They've gone, no, my option is cause mayhem. And also that behaviour is manipulation in a way as well. Yeah. Which is really frustrating.
And people are happy to say that, aren't they, as well? The amount of when my kids used to have meltdowns in the supermarket, it was almost like it was a beacon for pensioners. For some reason, like older people.
Like meerkats. They look up from their shopping and go, oh, someone's having a tantrum in the vegetable aisle. I'm going to go and give my opinion.
Yeah, give my opinion. I've had people tell my children they were naughty to their face.
To their face.
To actually say that's naughty behaviour. I've had a pensioner try and wave like a chocolate bar in front of them, like it was a dog or something. And it was just like, back off, please, just back off.
I mean, they mean well, I'm sure. They think that they're helping. You're not helping, Maud. Stop it. It's not manipulation. It's not some kind of devious Machiavellian ploy to help them achieve some kind of end goal, as we've discussed. And it's very frustrating because the implication is there that you are somehow letting them manipulate you.
Bad parenting.
And it's bad parenting, which is, the thing that underpins a lot of this judgment from the public. Yeah. The other one that people have a misconception of is the belief that the behavior is attention seeking. They're trying to get attention, which from everything that I've experienced with any meltdowns, the literal opposite is true of that. When my kids are in meltdown, the very last thing they want is people's attention, including mine, very often, anyone's attention. They just, they just need to be able to deal with it in their own way. Why would they want to be like, hey guys, look, I'm absolutely kicking the shit out of my bedroom?
Yeah, exactly. And our kids feel bad about it. They don't want to have a meltdown. They feel awful afterwards. It's not something anyone would want to have. And I think that's another thing that people don't realise is actually a lot of our kids afterwards do feel a little bit that sense of shame that happened. And when they come out of a meltdown, that can be a really crucial point to not send them back in when you're on about attention and people talking. The amount of times I've been sat with a child, in a school or wherever, who's just coming out of a meltdown, for somebody to come over and start talking to them. Are you okay now? And it's like, no, step away, and then you're back into the meltdown.
I think a debrief can be helpful, but you need to give it loads of space.
Not at that point.
Obviously, all meltdowns are horrendous for us as parents, but I think public meltdowns are the worst. As we've touched on, right, is when other people are trying to get involved in that, because obviously we're worried about our kids at that point. We want to do whatever it takes to get them through this. That is never resolved by someone else's input, ever. Never had a person who's actually been able to magically make my kid's meltdown disappear in public. So you're worried for your child. You're also aware of the judgment from other people, and you're also trying to just kind of separate the two because it's going to inflame the situation. And as you say, you've kind of had that previously. There's a social stigma involved when people see your child having a meltdown.
Yeah.
And I think I tend to feel bad sometimes because there's a people-pleasing element to me, and I don't want to disrupt other people's day as well. So that's multiple, I don't want, I'd rather this wasn't happening for everyone's sake, and I don't want you getting involved, especially with Jay, because his behaviour is explosive and fighty. Is that something that you experience a lot of in terms of the public meltdowns?
Yeah, definitely. So many public meltdowns. And like you say, it's that friction between what people expect of you and then what you're doing. Because in that moment, actually just being there, not doing anything and just keeping everybody safe is the best option. But when you've got, people watching your child kick the shit out of you or swear, and they're like, why are you not doing anything? I think that is one of the hardest parts of parenting an autistic child, and that judgment, because there've been many a times I've done that because of the pressure, even later on in my mothering career, where I've ended up parenting in a way that actually I know wasn't the right way to parent because of pressure from societal people watching. I think it's okay to admit that, because we've all felt that pressure. I remember on an aeroplane once where one of the kids was having a meltdown and it was kicking the back of the chair, and I just thought, I've got to do something, and I just shouted, because I just wanted the people around me to see I was doing something, that I am a good parent. Performative parenting, exactly.
It was like, look, I am parenting. See, but actually, really, it's like, trust me, I know what I'm doing. Okay. People don't, though, because they see the behaviour and think that the reason your child is having a meltdown is because you're a shit parent, and the fact that you're not getting involved by telling them to stop it is evidence that you're a shit parent.
And how much do you say? There've been times where I've been tempted to actually say something like, oh, he's autistic, but I've always held back from doing that. I don't know why, because do they need that information? They don't. That's none of their business,
Well, I think the context is important, because I think when you say that, they realise that there's something else going on in that situation. I've actually, the talk I do, I've got this decision tree where it kind of takes you through the decisions that you have to make. one of them is like, are you ever going to see these people again? If you're not, just fuck them. Doesn't matter.
Perfect.
The other one is, are they actually going to learn if you tell them?
Yeah.
You know, are they actually going to take that on board and do something? If they are, then explain a bit more. If they're not, ignore them.
That's such a good idea. Yeah, I really like that.
But yeah, it's very difficult having to juggle all of these things when you're having a meltdown, because your senses are heightened as well.
Yeah,
and your
exactly. We're dysregulated. As parents, we're often dysregulated in that moment, and we know that, you know, nervous systems mirror each other. So actually, we need to try and stay as calm as possible, because that's the thing that's gonna, you know, when we're both up here, nobody's coming down here. But if we're here, eventually our child's nervous system is going to meet us there.
Yeah.
But that can take time. That can take an hour. It could take 2 hours. And we're feeling so dysregulated inside ourselves. So it's really challenging.
Yeah, and as a parent of neurodivergent kids, if you're neurodivergent yourself and you're being triggered, possibly by the noise, possibly by all the other different variables, that must be incredibly difficult to navigate.
That's a really good point. That as, you know, being a neurodivergent parent, parenting neurodivergent kids, you've got these neurotypes that sometimes are, you know, bashing against each other. And also you can have like different things. But like my husband, is the way he presents and things that trigger him are very different to maybe how one of the kids is triggered. So he'll be in the kitchen bashing like plates around, making loads of noise. And my daughter is so noise sensitive that for her, that's like, you know, she's just, and you're trying to kind of balance all these neurotypes. And sometimes if you're the neurotypical one, you're like the thermostat, aren't you? Just like, turn this down. And so it's a lot to carry, I think.
It's a lot. So shout out to all of the neurodivergent parents of neurodivergent kids.
Yeah.
Just as a heads up, the next episode is going to be about exactly that.
Brilliant.
So we've looked at potentially what is going on behind meltdowns and how that can present. But I think it's important to look at how we can possibly reduce the chances of meltdown. Now, it's worth saying that I don't think there's any way we can reduce it entirely, because there is no way that we can remove all of the variables that potentially contribute to the dysregulation and overwhelm that leads to a meltdown, because the world exists. Other people exist. Noises exist outside of our control. We cannot lock it all down. So it feels bad to say this, but meltdowns are inevitable with neurodivergent kids. And even when they become adults. So a lot of neurodivergent adults discuss very openly. Pete Warmby talks a lot about on his socials about his overwhelm and how, you know, he's got more awareness of the things that cause it now. So as you're saying with your kids, they can regulate themselves more because they know some of the triggers, but it doesn't stop it happening because other things happen.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't control the world around you. You can't control other people's
If only we could, Lisa.
behaviour. Yeah.
But as we touched on earlier, our kids don't necessarily know what those triggers are early on. So a lot of what we can do to reduce their chances of meltdown is try and spot the signs.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you talk about in your new book, which I thought was a really useful perspective, is that meltdowns are communication.
Yeah.
It's the sign that the tipping point has been reached, right? It's the tip of the iceberg, if you like. And that there are so many other factors that have contributed to that.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the positive flip on meltdowns, is that they are communication and they are telling us sometimes, you know, because when you think about a meltdown, there's actually 3 parts to a meltdown. The way I describe it is you've got the lead up where we're getting dysregulated, and I see that as part of the meltdown.
Yes.
Then you've got what I call the eye of the storm, where there's very little you can do at that point other than to be there and co-regulate. And then you've got the calm down bit. And the bit, like the lead up to the meltdown, is the point where we really can potentially do something. And that's where we're looking for that communication, those signs that, like you said earlier, you know, every Tuesday he comes home from school and something's upset him. Okay, so it's noticing that. And if we can get in earlier, then potentially we can start to reduce the occurrences of meltdowns. Like you said, they're often going to happen, but if we can predict them a little bit more and we can kind of put things in place to maybe even reduce the intensity of them, it can feel quite affirming, really positive. You can do something about it.
Yeah, and I've definitely been able to sidestep meltdowns before, just by simple stuff, because you learn to spot the signs in each of your children as well, because the way it presents is very different. Otto, I can spot coming a mile off, because he's getting a bit more fizzy and he's getting a bit more emotional, and very often it's to do with an interoception thing. It's like, have you eaten?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you need a wee? You like just simple stuff like that, and then he's like, oh no, I need a wee.
Yeah.
So it's catching that and then going, well, what are the potential things that can be contributing to it? And hopefully it's as easy as that, but it doesn't. It's not always the case.
Not always. I see my daughter, even now, if we're in a cafe, I start to notice, like, it's in her eyes. I can see her. She starts to glaze over. And it's almost like she's going offline, and I can see you're going into shutdown. Yeah. And that, even as an adult now, that's helpful for me to say, put your AirPods in. Yeah. And so she can put them in, and then she's back with us. But it's very subtle. And like you said, as a parent, I think sometimes you're the only one who can see that.
And you want to get it when it's subtle, because it means that it's not too late, right? When it's obvious to everyone, you've already,
that's too late.
That horse is bolted, guys. And now you've just got to clear the area. Just deal with it. And with Jay, it is as well, like, if we're playing a game, I'll just notice he'll be becoming much more spiky and stuff. And, there's been occasions where I've gone, look, we're going to pause the game, not stop it. We're going to pause this right now. You need to just go and, calm down a little bit, and then we'll pick it up when you come back. Very rarely has that actually worked, because
I was going to say, is that successful?
No, it is if I get it early enough.
Yeah.
But if I don't, then it's too late, because then he's hell-bent on vanquishing everyone at the game. So it's a fine line, it's like an avocado, like the window of ripeness is so small.
That's brilliant.
And if you can get it, you can squeeze it and go, I think we're good. But otherwise it's gone to shit.
That's brilliant. I love that. Or a banana.
Yeah, exactly.
One day it's fine. It's fine. No, it's black.
No,
you can't eat it now.
But I think the point is that I think it's useful to know this. The tip of the iceberg analogy, and this communication analogy, is that our kids will have been trying to keep it together for way longer than we realise, and it's this slow drip feed of dysregulation until it becomes too much. So if you can spot the signs earlier, then it's good. I had a recent experience with Jay when I went to my brother's house for a family gathering at Easter, and he was really up for it at the start of the day, which I was surprised by, because it involved a long car journey, but he seemed quite up for it, and there were going to be people there, and it was a new house as well, so there was that. So I was surprised, and I was like, well, this is the plan, great, we're on board with it, great, we've got your Switch, I've got lots of other things. My mum had organised an Easter egg hunt, and she bought like 50 tiny eggs, because she's got a lot of grandkids, so she's like, I'm going to hide these, like, my mum has got like visions of being the Easter bunny in real life, right? So she's hiding these eggs, right? But for some reason, she hid them ridiculously well, right?
Oh,
so Jay now knows there are 50 eggs somewhere in this garden, right? But he's only found 2 after about 10 minutes, right? I'm seeing him getting more and more wound up that he's only found 2. And to make matters worse, my mum was helping the 2 youngest grandkids to find them. Now they're 5 and 6, so they need help, right? But they're getting help direct from the Easter bunny in Jay's eyes, which is just
not okay.
Not okay. So he's starting to feel this brewing sense of injustice as well, because he doesn't see a difference between why he, as a 13-year-old, should not be getting the same assistance as a 5 or 6-year-old when, they're getting the prizes and he's not. And I could see him starting to explode. So I basically stopped everything and I went, I think we need your Switch, don't we, right now? So I took him to a room that was quiet, and I got the Switch out, and then I realised I couldn't connect it to the internet because it was a new house and I didn't have their Wi-Fi.
Oh, no.
So I'm panicking at this point.
You can just see where it's going.
It's like trying to defuse a bomb.
Exactly.
I've only got a matter of seconds now. I need your Wi-Fi code immediately, right? And he's like, "What's the problem, dude? Calm down." I was like, "No, we do not have this time. Don't discuss it. Just give me the code." And fortunately, he managed to give me the Wi-Fi code, and I managed to connect it. But it was already at that point, that was not good. He was kind of past the point that would reset him, because I think some meltdowns you can stave off and reset. That was just the dysregulation was so high, his cup was so full that only managed to tip a little bit out of his cup, and I knew we were on borrowed time at that point. So I made an agreement with Jay that we would leave within, he said 5 minutes.
Right.
And I was like, well, I do need to say goodbye. I managed to get him to 15 minutes. I managed to negotiate, which I thought I took as a win. Yeah. So then it was a case of just getting all of our shit together, getting everyone in the car. The problem is that Otto and India are there having a lovely time.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? That it's just sometimes it feels so unfair, doesn't it, to siblings, when that sibling's meltdown means that they're going to miss out on things. And again, as parents, I think that's hard, isn't it?
It is, but that's the only way. And like the alternative is what? Just let loose a Tasmanian devil in someone else's new home.
Not an option.
Yeah. So we had to just go, and I knew that I kind of had to honour that 15 minutes because we'd made that agreement. So we basically got the hell out of there, like we'd stolen something.
Yeah. Well done.
It was a long car journey home, though.
I was going to say, I bet the journey itself was quite challenging.
Because you're sort of dealing with him still being in meltdown. And still saying awful things. Some awful things, just having to concentrate on the road. Yeah. I hope that there wasn't traffic jam, because that would have been, oh God, you know what it's like.
I'm tensing up just thinking about this, to be honest with you, Mark.
We got there. We did get there. But I did find it really, when I got home, I was like, oh, why can't we just have a nice time sometimes? Because I wanted that as well. But, So that's one of the things you could do to handle a meltdown, and not necessarily the best example of it, but just kind of spot it and just get the hell out of the situation that is causing the meltdown, regardless of who else is
I used to take the kids into the toilet at the supermarket. So if they were having a meltdown in the supermarket and people were watching when they were younger, I literally would bundle them up, either go to the car or go to the toilets, because it just gives you that bit of space out of the situation to try and diffuse before you go to the car. Yeah,
that's a good idea. It gives you a little bit of space as well to feel like you're not being judged. And another thing was we've touched on earlier is stop asking questions. That's I should have a tattoo of that on my.
Oh please, honestly, if that was if I only ever had one bit of advice for anyone, it would just be, shut the fuck up. Like in the middle of a meltdown, just stop talking. Please stop talking.
Yeah. And because it's so tempting to try and find out what it is, but you're not going to be able to get the answers you need in that situation. So with India, again, I've talked about this before, Bluey is a really good way of regulating India, because it's familiar and it's comforting to her. So very often I won't talk, I'll just lead her towards her bedroom and I'll put on Bluey. I won't speak, or I'll put her in a little nook. She's got a little in a cupboard. She's got a little sensory nook with that's like amazing. Duvets and sensory lights and that kind of thing, and lots of squishies that she hasn't destroyed with her builder's fists, and then pop on Bluey, and that tends to help. And with Otto, like I know with Otto, again, it's just learning how they respond differently, right? So with Otto, it's about getting him out of his head and doing something physical, getting him into the physical. So I've told the story before where he was in meltdown and we were in public and I had a frisbee on it and I just went, go long, and I threw the frisbee and he ran after it and he caught it. It was like magic. He just snapped out of it, because physical thing, great. He throws it back to me. I know what this is. This is familiar to me. This is comforting for me. I'm in my body rather than my brain. Now, if I'd have done that with Jay, he would have not been happy about that at all. And India similarly. So it's about working out what works for each of them. I mean, did you have those sort of shortcuts for yours?
Yeah, and it's exactly what you said. It's about getting them back into their body, because when we're in a meltdown. We're in our head, we're not rational. And one of the things that used to work for my kids, like not all the time, was to give them a fizzy sweet. So you put a fizzy sweet in your mouth and it actually triggers the ventral vagal nerve, which is what makes us go, oh, okay, I'm in my body. Heart rate starts to slow down and our breathing. And it's that shock. And it can be something as simple as that. That's similar to your frisbee in a way. It's like, okay, it's that. I need to bring myself back. But yeah, an occupational therapist told me that once.
That's a wicked idea, because you can't do a frisbee in a supermarket.
You can't do a frisbee in a supermarket. No, you can grab some frizzy sweets though. Yeah, it's a sensory distraction. As I say, it stimulates the vagal nerve, and then also when you're chewing, you've got to regulate your breathing. So
I've never thought of that. Is a fantastic idea. Yeah. I'm gonna like sour sweets as well. Like Otto, they like, because it's like, what the.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's
brings you back into your body. Yeah. That's an incredible idea.
A very cold glass of water. Obviously, that's not always ideal in a meltdown to hand the child a glass.
It's not seen as a treat either.
Yeah, it's not seen as a treat.
Whereas like Otto is driven by sweets.
If our child's having a meltdown and we're feeling dysregulated, a really cold drink of water can help us to bring us, or even a hot drink.
Or an ice cube as well, like in this weather as well.
Perfect. Yeah.
That's a really good suggestion. I love that one. Another one that I cannot stress enough, and it's mainly for talking to my former self, is do not tell them off for how they're responding in this situation. And it took me a long time to learn that, particularly with Jay, when it's rude or aggressive. And again, when you're attracting disapproval in public and you feel like you need to be seen to be doing it, you're only making matters worse by doing that, because they're not doing this voluntarily. So telling them off for something they have no control over is going to make things worse. It's going to bring in shame to the situation as well, because they're not trying to be naughty.
No.
And of that feeling of injustice as well.
And also I think consequences afterwards as well. Sometimes when we're parenting, we feel like there has to be a consequence. And I work with a lot of families where two parents aren't parenting the same. So you might get one parent who maybe can understand it a little bit more, but another parent is like, well, no, there needs to be a consequence for smashing that window or breaking that guitar. But again, like you said, it doesn't work, because it's not like next time it happens they're going to remember that,
exactly,
because they're not using the thinking part of their brain. So again, you can't rationalize with someone who's having a meltdown. You've got that shame, so you can't, telling someone they're going to be grounded, and it's going to make absolutely no difference to the next time they have a meltdown.
No,
it isn't about thinking,
but it will make a difference to this one, and it's not going to be a positive,
and it's not going to be a good one.
It's going to go to shit from personal experience. And it is hard. It's a mindset shift when you're parenting, because you inherit that parenting methodology, like you're saying, of thinking you need to learn not to do this again. There needs to be consequences, because when I was parented, that's the way things worked. Okay, I was punished for stuff that was perceived as naughty, and typically it would work, because it'd be like, okay, I'm not doing that again, because my dad's going to go ape shit. And early on for me, I think there was a little voice in my head, and I think it's true of a lot of parents of neurodivergent kids, of going, you're letting them walk all over you. You're letting them get away with this, and that is this little echo of parenting past, isn't it? This little ghost of the
the ghost of parenting
the ghost of all of your ancestors going, this is not how an Alan exists in the world, just judging you.
Absolutely. And I think as a generation of parents, we are the first generation, I think, of parents who are starting to parent our neurodivergent kids like that. I think I'm quite a bit older than you, but I think it is. I think it's hard for us, because we are forging a path. We are forging the way forward for parenting. And it's not easy, because like you said, we have got all of that history attached to how parenting should be, and the understanding of autism and that neurodiversity affirming movement that we're kind of all part of now. It's all very new. So it's completely understandable to feel that pressure and have that little voice going, you're not going to let them speak to you like that, are you? That's not okay. And even now, I still get it. It's programmed in us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hardwired, and it's a really difficult thing. But you do build up a resilience to it, I think. And I also think it has the impact it's had on my relationship with Jay has been pretty big as well,
Yeah.
because I'm not sort of fighting fire with fire, and I'm not building up that sense of shame in him and the feeling of injustice in him. Once that moment has gone and I've not told him off or made him or introduced consequences, he very often now, or maybe not very often, but he sometimes now comes to me to sort of to repair that. So he'll sometimes come to me and say, I'm sorry about that. Not all the time.
No, but even just starting to do that is massive.
And I know he does that with Tam as well. So then you're getting this sort of that healing time between you, which is really important, I think, for everyone. And I don't think I get that if I was punished, because the feeling of injustice would be too strong.
As well, and injustice and shame,
and they carry that as well. That all layers up. You know, it's like, this guy's an ogre. He'll never receive my apology.
And repair is important. Repair is a really important part of that. But like you pointed out, you can't force that. That has to be something that they learn over time, and being able to have that conversation with you, I think is amazing. I think that's really good.
The final thing that we can do to try and help to navigate meltdowns, which we touched on earlier, understand what it is that is potentially the trigger for this, and giving them access to whatever regulates them as soon as possible. Soon as possible. So if they're getting triggered by the supermarket, ditch your shopping trolley and get the hell out of there. You know, order online, back at home in the safety of your house. Whatever it is, do not feel obligated to push through with something that you're currently in the middle of, if it's causing the dysregulation. Yeah.
Really good point. And that's like your story with Jay at the Easter egg hunt. It's like knowing when to step away from something, when to go, we're not going to do this. And supermarket, I think, is one of the worst places. I think we just, like you said, we started doing the big shop online when Barney was about 6 or 7. I think we'd had a few meltdowns where things had been moved in the supermarket, so his salt and vinegar crisps weren't where they usually were, and that was like, no. And obviously you've got all the other stuff of the sensory and the, you know, and the overhead lights. And then we'd had somebody come close to the trolley and he'd growled at them. That was his favorite thing to do when he was like getting close. He was like, just growl at these people. And I was like, right, I'm done.
Well, that's a sign, though, isn't it? Right? It's like, but you're doing it before it absolutely gets to that breaking point. So it's like, this is the sign that we need to just leave the shopping here.
And you're on about like giving them sources of regulation. I think also there's a lot of shame attached to the sources of regulation themselves sometimes. So giving your child a screen because you know that that's going to stop the meltdown, but the judgment for giving a child a screen or a phone in a restaurant, if anyone ever goes to a restaurant, because we didn't, or wherever, or someone's house or a party, or, things that are going to regulate them, but that are seen as bad parenting. Again, it's that shame, and being able to put that aside and say, no, I know this regulates my child, and so I'm going to use it.
Yeah, I'm going to be taking my children on holiday on my own abroad.
Oh, wow.
In less than a month's time.
Gosh.
And I am going to need everything that I have available. Fizzy sweets now,
definitely
number one. Number one,
shoving them in their mouths.
Exactly. But screens, and it's basically whatever it is that I can get to regulate them. I'm not going to be able to use a frisbee in an airport, so I'm going to have to think about something.
Something else.
Something else that is going to something physical for Otto to do.
Those like juggling beanie balls or something like that.
Fidgets. It's going to be a bunch of fidgets, and it's going to be. I'm already. Wow. I just had a moment this morning of going, "What have I done?
What am I doing?"
We'll do it. We'll be fine. It's the journey I'm more worried about rather than while we're there. Because while we're there, we can, we're not really in public. We can stay in the cabin and like venture out when we need to, but. I should do like a whole summer series of it.
You should, definitely. That's
special.
Amazing.
But it's about getting them access to whatever it is that regulates them as soon as possible, and working out what that is, and not feeling ashamed of doing that. It's like your number one priority is your kids and trying to get them out of meltdown or stave off meltdown. So don't feel any shame of doing that to keep everyone safe and regulated.
It's not all rubbish.
Okay, in every episode of Neuroshambles, I like to look at the positives of the topic of the week. There are very few positives to meltdowns, really. They're
That's
pretty
a challenging one.
They are, yeah, pretty harrowing for both the child and the parent and any onlookers caught up in the drama very often as well. As you said, though, one of the positives is that it is useful communication. That it's a sign that everything is too much, but once you've reached the point of meltdown, the cat is now out of the bag. It's like, you know, you're not going to be able to put things back very easily, but it gives you clues, right? It gives you an insight into what it is. And very often, a lot of what I've learned about my child's neurotypes and how they present has been from deconstructing what happened and like retracing your steps, right? Like it's like Poirot. You look at the clues and then put them all together and go, okay, this is what led to that. And I find that deconstruction helpful in hindsight.
Yeah, it's the debrief, isn't it? It's the debrief, and then it's the risk assessment next time. So it's like, okay, this is one of the things that we realise. So next time we're almost going to put something in place to try and stop that. So it's communication, and it's another positive is, I think we touched on it before, but it's actually sitting with your child through the meltdown and actually through those big feelings, and that they know it's safe to have those feelings, that we're not shaming them for it. And in my generation, it was like, super nanny, go and sit on the naughty step if you had those, and leave you alone to handle those behaviours. We're not doing that. A child doesn't actually learn from that. So, one of the positives is actually helping them to realise it's safe to have those feelings, and an adult isn't going to, tell them off or put them, somewhere else to deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there are very few positives to meltdowns, I agree.
No, we're trying. We're desperately trying. It's just one of those that, as they get older, I think, and they start to be able to advocate for themselves, and they start to understand what their needs are, I think that definitely helps. Definitely. And hopefully the more we understand and the more we can communicate to them, the more we're equipping them with those tools so that they can go through their adult life being able to minimize meltdowns as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what all three of mine now do. They decide, is it worth being dysregulated or not, or am I going to avoid it? And that's a life skill, and I think if we're able to give them that, then that's a really positive thing.
Yeah, which gives me so much hope, Lisa. You have no idea. It's like talking to you is like, okay, this is what I want, from my kids to be able to do. So it's great to know that those strategies work. Yeah,
from jumping out the window to now deciding I'm going to go to this club, but I'm going to be a bit dysregulated afterwards. That's it's a big step, isn't it?
Yeah, that's massive. Yeah, that is massive.
Neurodiversity Champions.
Okay, Neurodiversity Champions time. These are the people or organisations that are doing miraculous things in the realm of neurodiversity. Do you have any Neurodiversity Champions for us, Lisa?
Yeah, but you've actually named him already. So the lovely Pete Warmby.
Oh, right. Okay. Always good to give Pete another shout out.
Yeah, he's got a book coming out actually the week after me. And I've had the privilege of reading it.
Oh, have you?
Yeah, it's about school and kind of because obviously that's a massive thing at the moment.
Yeah.
And it is just such an amazing book. And
I'm really looking forward to reading it.
Yeah, honestly, it's going to change. It's just going to change things so much.
Amazing.
I think Pete is like forging forward with it.
Oh, he's phenomenal.
Really,
yeah.
It's brilliant. Brilliant. It gives me goosebumps thinking about it because it is so brilliant.
Really fantastic. If you don't already know, he's been a Neuroshambles guest multiple times, but is a fantastic advocate, and it is talking to Pete, who is so clearly able to articulate what he has experienced as a neurodivergent adult, but also as a child, and how that presented itself when he was growing up, has really helped me to understand what my kids are potentially going through and what I can do to help to navigate their neurodivergency. So yeah, it was lovely to give Pete a shout out. Thanks for that. So yeah, if you want to pre-order that book, that is called Different Minds: How We Can Help Our Autistic School Children Thrive. I'll put a link in the show notes. That is the second book that should be on your pre-order list. The first book that should be on your pre-order list, the one that I've actually had the pleasure of reading in advance, is of course yours, Lisa. So you're my Neurodiversity Champion, because your book, Parenting Your Autistic Child: Permission to Do It Differently, is wonderful. I love it because it's so neuroaffirming, but it's also positive, right? Permission to parent differently it's something that kind of underpins the Neuroshambles ethos as well. So when I read it, it was like, yeah, this is, really reassuring that there's evidence, because you talk, that you give scientific basis to some of the things that we sort of do by instinct a lot of the time, which is wonderful. So I know that a lot of Neuroshamblers are going to get a lot out of it. So I'm going to put a link to that one in the show notes. That's out before Pete Warmby's. So you got a week to read that one.
Yeah.
And then
you can pre-order now.
So when's it available?
Publication is the 27th of August.
Okay.
Pre-orders are really important, and people I didn't realise this until I started being an author.
Yes.
Is that pre-orders kind of tell the algorithm to show it to more people, more parents, and then that tells retailers whether to stock it or not.
Right.
And if you pre-order, you also secured the lowest price before publication, and you won't pay anything till it's dispatched. So that's my little plug for pre-ordering.
Yeah, I've already pre-ordered mine. I'm very happy to
you.
do so. So that will be dropping at the end of August, which is great. But just tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, it's exactly like you said. It does what it says on the tin, really, and it's showing parents that the way they do parent, that parenting differently, there is a reason why it works, because we have a lot of shame, I think, attached to how we parent differently and how it's labelled as bad parenting for our kids. But like you said, the scientific evidence that shows that we're parenting our kids' nervous systems, and everything that we're doing, those things that we instinctively do, like giving screens or cooking that beige meal because we know that it's going to actually get something in their tummy, or all of that stuff that we do feel a lot of shame over, there's a reason why it works. And I want parents to really feel validated and understand the why. And I'm really glad that you said it feels like a positive book, because that really was my aim, was to show parents that actually, our kids are amazing and they can do amazing things. And there's a bit of my own life in there, and my kids' stories are in there, and the children and families I've worked with. So each chapter really has a little story about a family or my family to kind of make it real life for parents to see. It's
important, I think, because you've been at the front, you've been in the trenches, you've got the scars to prove it. So it's important it's important to be able to talk from lived experience.
Yeah, and it's quite interactive as well. So parents will work through activities as well, so that they feel they've got something tangible at the end, and family manifesto that they can kind of go, right, this works for my family, because every family is different.
Yeah,
as well.
exactly.
Yeah.
Tiny epic wins!
Okay, tiny epic wins now. These are the things that for neurotypical families would not be worthy of a mention, but sweet Jesus, for us neurodivergent families, they are epic wins, and I want to shout them from the rooftops. So do you have any tiny epic wins for us, Lisa?
Yeah, I was thinking really hard. I think now my kids are older, I was thinking, gosh, it's hard to think of any, but actually there was something the other day that will sound nothing to neurotypical families, and I had bought a phone holder for my car, and it didn't fit. It was the wrong one. And then I remember just turning to my husband and saying, oh, well, one of the kids can have it for their cars. And then I got this stomach flip, because I realised all three of my kids drive cars now.
Oh, wow.
And I never thought that would ever be possible.
Yeah.
When they were young, I just couldn't imagine it, particularly my PDA son. So that moment just felt really huge to me, and it was like, wow, my kids drive and they've got a car.
That's amazing. Yeah, that is an epic
my
win.
tiny epic win.
Yeah, and neurotypical families are a big deal. It's like, dude,
yeah,
you don't know where we've come from.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a tiny epic win, and that is Otto recently being able to articulate what caused the meltdown. Because recently I got dinner ready, and when he saw what dinner was, he started panicking and crying uncontrollably. Now, that's not because I'm a bad cook, right?
So you say.
My cooking's so bad I trigger meltdowns. No, it wasn't that. We normally have pasta on a Monday, Only Otto doesn't like pasta for whatever reason, so I have to cook him sausage sandwiches, right? That's the thing. We had a bit of a disaster with the food shop. They didn't deliver the sausages. I only realised on the day, so I had to make him pesto pasta. Now, it's not his preference, but I have sometimes been able to shepherd it through because he will just eat it because he's hungry, and that's okay. The big issue here was the accompanying dough balls, right? So my kids love the Pizza Express dough balls from the supermarket, but again there was a shit show with the shop and we had a substitution. My kids will not accept any other dough balls. It is unforgivable. It has to be the Pizza Express ones, and they were replaced by Asda dough balls. So when Otto walked in expecting to see sausage sandwiches and Pizza Express dough balls, he looked at the food and he saw pesto pasta and subpar dough balls. And it was just too much. So he literally just burst into tears and ran out of the room. So I gave him some space because I've learned not to chase after him and try and work out what was going on, order him down to eat his food and just to get over it, which is what I want to do. Do you know what I mean? It's like, come on, guys. But I didn't. I gave him space and he came back down again. And he was really clear on what caused it because I didn't actually know. As you say, this drip feed normally, there's a number of different things. It's the end of the day. This is the final straw. And he just said, Daddy, I don't like change. And Monday's normally sausages. So not only do I have pasta, but there are different dough balls as well. So 2 things have changed. And it was like, for him to be able to tell me that was huge for me. Because normally he wouldn't be able to do that, and I'd not really thought about it. Like I say, the clues are always there. I'd not really thought about it. I was just trying to feed 3 children to keep them alive. You know, that's my criteria. So when he put it like that, that made perfect sense. And I sort of, you know,
that's amazing. How amazing that he could tell you that.
Yeah, and it gives me a bit more hope that he's going to be able to anticipate what might cause a meltdown in the future and be able to advocate for himself when he's older. Maybe always have a packet of Pizza Express dough balls in the freezer. Just stock up on the Pizza Express dough balls.
It matters. It's Captain Birdseye in our house for everything.
Whatever gets us through it, isn't it, basically?
Exactly.
What the flip?
Okay, what the flip moments now. These are the things that our neurodivergent kids will say or do that completely flummox us and bewilder us, and I always like shining a light on some of these. Have you got any what the flip moments?
I was thinking really hard because obviously the kids are older now, so nothing recent, but then just this popped into my head. I don't know if it's a what the flip moment, but it was at Christmas time, I think, when Barney was quite little, and he kept going around doing this like impression, and it was like a mob boss.
Okay.
And he was talking about these wise guys. We were trying to work out what he was talking about. And then we realised that they'd been teaching at school the Nativity. And so he got a little bit confused with the 3 wise men. And somewhere along the way, he picked up this, whether it was from an advert or what, I don't know. So we were getting this wise guys.
The 3 wise guys. That's hilarious. I would love to see. Did he do that at the Nativity? That would have been hilarious. He's got turns up to baby Jesus as one of the 3 kings and goes, I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse.
That's exactly the accent he was using. And it was at the time where I'd been watching Bugsy Malone quite a lot.
Okay.
His sister was in it. So I think the 2 things became a bit merged.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. That's wonderful. I've got a few what the flip moments, as always. One of them, again, with Otto sort of being better able to articulate what's going on. I called him down for dinner. So I've got this sort of sing-songy voice that I use because I've realised that shouting, they don't always respond. So I sing their names and they perk up and they come downstairs. But he didn't respond for ages. And eventually he came down and I said, why did you ignore me? And he said, I wasn't ignoring you. I just didn't want to hear what you said. It's like, all right, tell it as it is.
Exactly.
You know, I like it.
Fair enough.
Yeah, fair. Yeah. I can't disagree with anything you just said there. Fine. Another one I had with India recently was we were talking about her recent school report and her issue with maths. And I said, are you saying that you don't like maths? And she went, no, I'm saying I hate maths. It's like, all right, yeah, let's get the record straight. It's not just a
Yeah,
dislike.
get it right.
It's like, you know, next level hatred of it.
Yeah.
So, again, I love her plain talking.
Yeah,
And the final what the flip again was from India, where it was just again this summer and it's hot and just the end of school year, and I'm getting a lot of pushback on everything at the moment.
Yeah.
Every time I ask them to do something, there's pushback, and I was hot and tired and exasperated, and I just went, "Oh, can you stop giving me grief?" And India went, "It's not called grief, it's called independence." It's like, wow, that perfectly captures what
Love
is going
that,
on the mind
yeah.
of a PDA child right
Yeah.
there.
Exactly.
And again, you
Amazing.
can't argue with that, can you? It's like, no,
No,
you're
that's
right.
logic.
You're absolutely right. I yield to your superior logic. It's never dull.
No.
Okay, that is it for the end of this episode of Neuroshambles. Firstly, as always, Lisa, thank you so much for coming on and shining a light into this topic of the week. It's always a privilege to be able to hear your perspective.
Well, thank you for having me. We got there in the end, technical problems and all.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you also to Neuroshamblers far and wide for listening and for spreading the word and for saying nice things via email, hello@neuroshambles.com, or via the socials on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok. Please subscribe if you haven't already. You'll probably, hopefully, receive some updates throughout the summer when I take a bit of a hiatus from Neuroshambles to deal with the summer holidays. I think that's pretty much it now. All that remains for me to say is have a nice life.